So I'm a big fan of black Sharpie markers. I have a whole bunch of them. I use them all the time. I like to buy the strange ones like this crazy Magnum series. But day to day, I tend to use the standard Sharpie fine point a whole lot. I go through a fair number of these, and I recently picked up the Amazon Basics version. They don't call it a Sharpie, but it's a black permanent marker, clearly aimed after the Sharpie. And it is cheaper, so I wanted to tell everyone a little bit about it and my experience with it. So here's the standard Sharpie. They usually go for $7 in a 12 pack. You know, give or take a buck, but call it $7 for 12. The Amazon Basics, which are essentially the same thing, or that's the goal at least, they sell for $4.26 right now for a 12 pack. Here's how they show up. Very plain Jane packaging, nothing fancy. It's Amazon Prime, so it's not an add-on item or anything like that. And you just get 12 of them in a box, just like you'd expect. Obviously the Sharpie comes with slightly nicer packaging. Both have clips, pretty much the same size, diameter, very much no frills. So do a quick writing test and we'll see how this pans out. First up, the Sharpie, and I believe this one has some miles on it. Pretty standard. We've all written with Sharpies before. They're great. They tend not to last super long, which is why I go through them. So I really don't have any tolerance for them as they get older and they start to, the lines start to fade a little bit, as you could probably see. Again, that one is a little bit older. I just don't happen to have any new ones because I bought these Amazon Basics permanent marker. They don't call it, let me see if they call it the fine point. Yeah, they don't call it the fine point or anything like that. They just call it the Amazon Basics permanent marker 12 pack. Design is very simple. The cap is not on super tight. That'd be my first bit of feedback. I haven't had it come off accidentally, but these things will ruin any sort of fabric they touch, so you want to be careful with that. And the cap does come off very easily. The cap does post, no problem there. Size-wise, everyone knows the Sharpie is pretty much the ideal size. Diameter feels the same. Length is pretty much identical. The Sharpie cap will not post on the Amazon Basics, so we know there's some differences, but really very minimal. That's how they write. Just like a Sharpie, maybe a slight less bit of ink coming out. The Sharpie, a new Sharpie feels very generous with ink to me. Let's give it a shot. This one's quite or rather new. So they feel really similar. Again, maybe the Amazon feels a little bit stingy on ink, but some of that might just be because this one is brand new. The newer ones, the ones I've been using, they don't feel like they really put out that much more ink as they go. And I don't know that the ink quality is as high as the Sharpies. I feel like the Sharpie has a really nice black tone. Could be a little hard to make out here, but the Sharpie, even an older one, has a really good saturation and black tone to it. With the Amazon Basics, it's not quite as dark. This is a slightly glossy paper. Again, we're talking like such a subtle difference. I feel like we just recognize that subtlety because we've all used Sharpies for, you know, hundreds of hours. But overall, I would say that unless you're like a super fan of the Sharpie, the Amazon Basics is a really nice way to go. It'll save you a couple dollars. You're getting a nice big pack of these things. Here's another Sharpie. And the final test. can be a little hard to compare between the two, just with those Kings and the Magnums lay down a whole lot of ink. So Magnum, or sorry, this is the smaller one, the king size. And then there is the Amazon Basics. Not quite the same level of saturation, but pretty close. And considering you're saving a fair bit of money, I would say that the Amazon Basics is a pretty reasonable way to go. Again, I would say like it's not fully 100% the quality of the Sharpie, but it'll probably get you 95% of the way there, and you save like, I don't know, maybe 40% of the price. So if you're going through a lot of these, or you're buying them for school or for business, and you want to save some money, then Amazon Basics is a nice way to go. And that's the typical scheme we've seen with these basics, right? Or maybe not scheme, but the typical pattern is you get about 90% of the quality for, 75 or 60% of the price, something like that. And, maybe it's not for everyone, but in this case, it seems like a pretty good way to go. Thanks for watching.